I wanted to make sure during this conversation we talk about something we're both pretty passionate about. I know you've become quite the avid practitioner in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, so talking about combativeness, getting into a competitive arena. What was your introduction to BJJ, and what's that been like?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. I pray, God willing, to be a lifer. My whole family's involved, down to my 4-year-old, and I've seen what it's done for them. And if you don't know BJJ, it's kind of like wrestling, but plus joint locks and submissions and chokes and things like that. And I mean, there is the self-defense thing, I think, was the motivator initially, and that's still there. I think if it's one-on-one and there's no weapons involved, I think BJJ is lethal. But if all you want is self-defense, probably carrying a gun, to be honest with you, right? And what I've really kind of seen is it's become a spiritual journey. It's become, I mean, yes, there's a self-defense part, but it's, can you be comfortable in uncomfortable spots? Can you learn to not panic when your breath is being choked out? Can you, and this is what I see my kids down the line, they'll say, what have you gained from this? Confidence. Like a deep confidence that's, I know how I've grown. Like we don't have, you think about crafts or musical instrument, language, things that when you practice, you get better at, work with your hands. It has that feel because you get more and more fluid. I played team sports all my life, but there's something about like, I did that. Like I couldn't do this before, and now and the thing about BJJ is size and strength doesn't hurt, but when you first start, you see people that are skilled, that are half your size. I mean, they just destroyed me. And even my kids, my teenage boys can both take me. And I got 70 pounds on them. My 12-year-old daughter, I can go 80, 90%, and I can't submit her. I mean, because she knows what she's doing. So to me, for me growing up, I was, football, it was like, how much can you bench press? It was just kind of like macho, and I love BJ, because I love the art. I love the kind of anti-macho-ness. It's like, no, it's a skill. It's like a boa constrictor. It's gonna you might not see it coming, but bam, now you're out. And one thing I'll say too is, I have almost never seen someone talk trash in practice or at a tournament because there's like a respect factor just by your opponent doing this, that it's just a different culture than I grew up with, football and the Varsity Blues movie, things like that. And so I really wanted this for my kids. I love it. One of our mutual friends, Dr. James Madden, philosopher, he got into it. So he was kind of my link. I mean, I saw what it did for him and his kids, and I finally said, I'm in. And so we're about, going to come up on 3 years soon, and just absolutely love it.
Yeah, I love that there is a spiritual component to it, because one of the things that we struggle with as human beings is the need to control everything. And the whole philosophy within martial arts of empty your mind, of being able to do these things as in second nature, because you've repeated them so many times that now your hand finds certain places, you know how to grab certain things certain ways without even thinking about it. And I remember having a conversation actually with Madden about this, about how I mentioned the idea of chess around that. He says it's actually not like chess. It's much more just becomes second nature. That if you're thinking too much, you will find yourself in a hole and hurt. Right. And so the beauty of that is that it flows right into our spiritual life, I think, because we want to control what God is doing for us so often, and the ability to physically tell yourself, you're not in control, man. Relax, do the work, do the repetitions, say your prayers, get those repetitions in, but understand that along the way, it needs to become second nature, and it needs to just flow, how to tap into that flow. Because when you first start, it's all grip and you're sore all over because you're holding on so tight. And then years later, you're like, wow, I have a couple bruises, but my muscles are used to this now.
I got hurt way more often the first 6 months than that, because you're just trying to brute strength everything. Yeah. And our friend Jim, he likes to say, well, the enemy gets a vote, right? So it's you can kind of calculate it, but you have to react to what they're doing and feel their momentum. And to me, our Lord is the great jiu-jitsu artist, right? I mean, here comes evil on the cross, and he turns it against itself, that's what BJJ is all about. It's not about I'm going to just brute strength this. I'm going to take your momentum, your balance, your leaning, whatever it is, and I will turn it against you and tie you in a pretzel without ever throwing a punch, which just boggles my mind. I'm still at the beginning, but Yeah, if you can't tell, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also as guys, but then also girls as well. Is I always say, when we think about Jesus, we often think just purely about the lamb, but he was a lion as well. And so us participating in the competitive nature on a regular basis, especially a sport like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is something you can do for your entire life. I mean, I've met guys that are in their late 70s still doing it, and good and really good at it, masters, right? And so I think that it allows guys, especially guys that love sports. I grew up playing sports just like you did, and when you get a certain age, some of that's just not possible. But this type of art, gosh, it's something you can do for the rest of your life.
It really is, and I think Christians and Catholics sometimes have kind of an ambivalent relationship with the martial arts, and we're kind of. I really think that you're more likely to get hurt on a football field, because in BJJ you can tap. Like, you get in trouble and you tap and you can shut it off. You can't shut off a play in the middle of a kickoff. Now, I'm still a football fan. I'm not anti, but I think in terms of, and even MMA, because we have MMA at our gym, and I've gotten to know those guys, and I've got a son that's really interested in MMA, and they're literally, and I'm sure you can find exceptions where people have been bad sportsmen, but like, they're not trying to hurt each other. Like, they're trying to get better, and there's such a respect. A book that we talked about, The Professor in the Cage. I mean, I've like things that what I thought about MMA 3 or 4 years ago before I started this, and now getting to know those guys, I think totally different about it. And there's a need for Catholic men to also be men, as we've talked about before. And you can do that in lots of ways. Like, this might not be for everyone, but I think there's a need to not be afraid of that. And we outsource so much in our culture, right? Your kid wants to learn ball, you send him to a camp. You outsource everything, obviously including our law enforcement, as we should. I'm not saying otherwise. But there is something about being able to do some things yourself, or at least knowing that if you absolutely had to, you would know what to do, whether it's CPR, whatever it is. And I think this fits right into that. And I think what happens with the MMA guys and gals and BJJ is, especially the younger kids too, like, you're testing yourself in as safe of an environment as you possibly could. And you really don't have the need to do it on the playground or to do it at the restaurant. I mean, you don't need to go pick up, because like you actually have tested yourself. You know what you can do in a pretty violent situation, but in a controlled way, and you kind of get that out of your system, and you have that sense of, yeah, I've done that. I've been there before, and if it were to happen, God forbid, again, you're preparing for something you hope never happens, I think you're less likely to just completely flip out and panic, because you've seen it, you've experienced it in a controlled way. And I'm not trying to say it's not, you're not a soldier, you're not in war. Like, I would know nothing about bullets flying at me, and I have so much respect for those men and women. But I just think there's something about testing ourselves in this way that, frankly, I'm not sure that the sports culture fully replicates in the same way. Even something like football, again, I played football for many years, football did not do this for me and my kids in the same way as BJJ has. So I think I just think Catholics and Christians, let's not poo-poo it too quickly. Let's not say it's just pagan, because there's something in us, I think especially the men, that wants to fight and know that we can fight, doesn't want to pick fights, but wants to know that if something went down, we would know what to do. And that maybe we would be a little bit less afraid when it happens. Again, God forbid.